Okay, everyone. So from this point on, really, the the structure of this thing is going to just kind of start to develop kind of on its own, and it's really just through a series of thinking through how and why certain things should interact the way they do. Um, so let's kind of just look at it as a very simple. Actually, let's do. On squares. I don't think I want to do that. So essentially, what I want you guys to start doing at this point is to let your basically let your elements start to build upon one another, and we're using the same kind of tectonic that we used whenever we created and connected surfaces in the planar superimpositions project. So my first point in this assignment is to actually create a surface that's going to connect to both of these elements. And remember, I said that two bars, right, two beams or whatever you want to call them, two linear elements can't touch directly to one another, right? So you need to have them on layers that are going to essentially not interact, because we need to have a surface that connects the two of them. So that's what I'm going to do here, right? They're both on primary axes, but I'm going to need a primary, what do I want to call this one?
Optimus primary.
I'll just call it primary surface for now. And then I'm going to need another one. I think I am going to go with the secondary axis name. So we'll have a primary axis and a secondary axis, and this is our primary surface, right? So the primary is this one right here, and so that primary one I'm going to put up top. You can just click and drag these. Primary surface is going to be the connective tissue in between, and then the secondary axis is going to be this purple one. And you guys don't have, again, you don't have to do exactly what I'm doing at this stage. I'm just trying to narrate through the thought process that's going through my head while doing this. Secondarily, I need to actually create that connective tissue, and I'm going to start with a large sheet since this is a primary element. So I'll copy and I'll go with one that has a little bit of transparency. Copy and paste and put it over here, but I'm going to make sure that this is on the primary surface layer. Arrange, send a current layer, and now you can kind of start to see a little bit of what it's, the kind of effect that this is going to have, right? We can actually start to see depth. You can see some three-dimensionality just by the sheer nature of it having translucencies. So anyway, using the grids is going to be the primary way that I'm actually starting to connect these things. And so, the simple way is to kind of look at it, if I just dropped it all the way in the top right corner, what does it do? Feels a little cheesy. I'm going to slide it down this way. That feels a little better, but maybe I want to actually, really focus on that primary axis. And so if I align the center line of this to be on the primary axis, it could be quite strong. I'll pull this over and see how that looks. That feels kind of strong to me. It's a full bleed, so it anchors something to a bit of a boundary. But it also, because the primary axis is dead center, it creates like that focus that's right on it. And just from a first look at it, it feels like it's accentuating that corner pretty well without being exactly on the corner. Does that kind of make sense? So the progress of this assignment is going to be a development like that, right? Think through the rule sets that you're engaging, right? So this is above that. And now we just kind of need to basically continue along that path. So my second surface needs to be anchored using some additional armature, right? So how are we going to do that? Maybe now that I have my primary surface, right? I have my primary axis, which has the connective tissue behind it, which has a secondary axis that is horizontal, which tells me perhaps my additional surfaces and armatures are actually going to start to be more vertically oriented. And so I think, actually, I'm doing surface next, right? Yeah. So I think from there, the next derivation that I want to do here is probably pull like a primary surface in the back that's going to create more of like a grid system to help me create some vertical striation. So let's pull I'm going to pull an opaque line, or an opaque medium-sized square. And this is going to have to go on a layer that's behind the secondary axis for me. It's going to look like that. Yeah. Too centered. There we go. I think I dig that right now. All right, so I'm kind of feeling that at the moment. And then, basically at this point, you just keep, name it, create a new layer, drop some geometry. Name it, create a new layer, drop some geometry. And then from there, you just start to create the language that it's going to communicate. So for me, I'm building off of that primary corner, and I'm just continuing to generate. That's basically it. So this one I'll have to call secondary surf, new layer, under secondary surf, and this one's going to be tertiary axes, not tertiary, tertiary. Okay, and just so you can kind of, and I'm just going to finish this out here while I'm talking through it. You guys feel free to develop your own. I'm going to select my tertiary axis line, which is the small one. And I think I'm going to run one vertical. Let's go there. Yeah. So one vertical, I think I'll do probably two horizontal. Let's see. Or no, I guess I can only do one horizontal. There we go. Except this one, I think I want to put it... Ah, I know how I want to do this. So I'm going to have one system here with 3 tertiary axes that happen in the background. And my derivation at this level is to put another one of these. There we go. Something like that. And then I'm going to generate another layer that goes in the front, and that'll have some more tertiary axes that happen up there. And these two are also going to deviate by extending left. Oh, I put it on the wrong layer. Okay, 1 and 2. bleed. There we go. It might be too busy actually. Let me get rid of this one. And I think these need to be full bleed as well. You're not going to see that. Okay. Yeah, you're not going to see that. There we go. Okay, so then I just need to finish this off with my final surfaces, and they're going to be the small ones. So I'm going to have the small, very translucent one, and I'm going to anchor that to this intersection, which, let's see, I'll anchor that to this intersection. And this one is going to go in the back, so I'll make this, I'll just call it BG surf. And then I'll make another surface all the way in the front, and I'm going to call that, oh, this is tertiary axes. This layer on the front, I will call this FG surf for foreground surface. And that one will be also a light line. So let's anchor that. I don't really have a good anchor. Let's anchor it on this. Okay, so that is on the wrong layer. All right, so outside of that, really, it's just a matter of color and color composition. So I think first and foremost, I'm going to change the actual opaque one to be a different color, right? So this gray just isn't reading a lot. So if I change this, I think I'm going to change it probably to the more tan color to try and, well, actually no, I think I want that to be yellow. I'll go with the more emboldened and kind of colors. Additionally, I think the tertiary axes should, actually, let me go back. I want to keep that tan. I'm going to change my tertiary axes to be yellow. Oh, I don't have anything on that layer. Thank you. There we go. That's going to read better. And I seem to have lost the layer for that. So let's change my FG surface. I'm going to change that to be not tan. Let's leave that one purple. And my BG surface, not blue, that's too much. Leave it gray. Okay. I need to find those other two lines. So anyway, I'll find those two lines and I'll fix it, but basically this is what we're doing. Okay, so let me just kind of cap off the last part of the tutorial section here. Really, what I want you to be doing is thinking through the idea of a simple algorithm, right? So everything about this was really just sets of three, right? I have 3 different size squares. I have 3 different size lines. I have only 3 different colors of axes. I have only 3 different colors of squares. I have only 3 different levels of transparencies. I'm operating off of the rule of thirds, right? There's not that much that I'm doing that's outside of the realm of the number 3. Okay, so feel free to, you don't have to do rules of 3, okay? I'm not trying to say do that. What I am trying to say is have a basic idea about a system and then compile it. It's really that simple. And then outside of that, the actual assignment that I want you to do is to think of, get this, 3 different concepts and create them. Okay, so my concept of a system of threes or layering threes, whatever you want to call it, that's one. Then you'll have to think of another one. Maybe that one deals with quads and basically like scales of quad subdivisions or something like that, right? Think of something super basic that you can wrap your head around in like 10 minutes. What questions do you have?
What?
You don't get it, Yvonne?
I don't.
What part of it don't you get?
I think what I got confused was the part where you were like, you want 3 separate artboards, or you want the same one to have 3 concepts?
Like, you know how you came up with the concept right now? You want to see
Yeah.
the other ones first.
Oh, like
That's correct.
But on separate artboards, or?
You could do separate files, you could do separate artboards, however you want to set up the file, I don't care.
That's a whole algorithm.
But I think what you're asking is, do you want it all in one thing? No, I don't want you to just lay them over top of one another.
Okay, that's what I thought.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. I was like, oh.
Oh,
Yeah.
No, I want you to think like this is one complete concept.
Okay.
Then I want you to change it and do another.
Oh, okay, that makes sense.
Okay?
Justin's confused too. Justin has some questions too. Right?
Yeah, well, just like design systems. Like, what are some variations? Like, do you have an example of like any kind of like graphic? These are like graphic design systems right here, right?
Yeah. So this one, I mean, is pretty much primarily just built off of rule of thirds, right? You could do.
Just like a break away from what you're doing.
Yeah, I mean, I'm open to you changing the canvas size, and you can look at basically like panoramics, right? So how do you provide focus in panoramics, particularly when your focal points are stretched, right? And if you have squares that you're trying to put in panoramics, that's a bit of a juxtaposition that's quite interesting. And then how do you, the other idea would be like, how do you communicate movement or time?
Sure.
Because you can do that with static geometry. You can communicate movement and time, and the,
showing a different.
yeah, I mean, the simple version really is this, right?
Yeah.
The gradient that you see here, that's almost like it's kind of, this block has moved and that's the fade that falls behind it. That's an option. Otherwise, you can just show like progressively larger squares in order, but have a geometrical sequence for where they're laid out and why.
You tile them up in front of each other?
Yeah, I'm not saying just like,
No,
don't create a logo out of it.
Showing depth using geometry kind of.
You can do that, but what
Big square, small square.
let me show you what I mean. Right, so the simplest version of that is you take this and like that, right? So like this turns to that, or even, in an even more clear way, right? Something like this.
Yeah.
Shows growth, right? But if you're going to show something like that, what I want you to focus on is the geometrical construct within which you can regulate that growth. Okay? So that means
Where they divide.
that means that you're actually creating a system. Oops. So basically this has a linearity, right? Line that to the top. This one probably in the center. This one kind of down at the bottom. And then you set up your secondary axes. I'm just going to draw lines at this point, but these secondary axes happen somewhere from something. So maybe it happens to be on the midpoint, and then this happens to be at the quarter point. Something like this could be and this is going to be a super basic example here, but let's do it like that. So the super basic example is that if you're using midpoints and quarters, then you're controlling when and where you deviate from that system to communicate it, right? So you have your primary axis, which supports the verticality of this thing, right? So that's why when these squares are growing, they're growing vertically, right? And then from there, you have your nothingness, which is basically it didn't exist, and you're reading the timeline going left, right? This is nothingness. This is a partial existence. It's very small. This is your sort of like mid-stance existence, and then finally, once you cross over your main axis threshold, you have your fully engaged, size or mass or whatever you want to call it, and then this distance right here matches its non-existence. It's kind of like the life cycle, like life and death cycle in a way, right? You're showing the timeline of growth and then dissolution, and that's what this little thing is right there. So I'm getting like super poetic about it, but that's like I took your simple idea and I like went way off the rails with the poeticism of getting a concept built into it. But that's you can go that far, or you could just go really simple. But make sure that you have and I just did that.
Rule sets, like
any rule set.
I could divide it up like in quarters, but I also could have another rule set, like saying like it's divided up by 4 and it's changing density or capacity.
Yeah.
And those are the 2 rules that I follow. That it divides it by 4, and then also every time it divides, it changes in the passive form.
Yeah, you could do that absolutely.
Okay. Or every 2 squares there's a line type of thing.
Yeah, that's a every 2 squares there's a line or something like that. That's fine. Yes, absolutely. Everything should have some kind of algorithmic cadence, right? Like this one is quarter, quarter, half, full, right? So it's yeah.
And then from there you kind of just stop it and then repeat it. Well, we don't have to repeat it. It's just
this could continue to grow. Like you could just sit there for like an hour and just keep layering them on and do a bunch of crazy stuff with it. Like quarter here, half there, full here, Are we not, or are we restricted to boxes and lines?
It looks pretty without it. It looks like a sculpture.
The intent of the exercise is to explore this almost exclusively in boxes and lines. However, if you're thinking like a designer, right, there are always deviations, right? So when and where you deviate, you should have a reason for it, a conceptual reason for it, okay? So just make sure that when that happens, you're able to communicate it. All right. Any further questions? How many of you are totally in love with this assignment? All right, we got like 1, 2. All right, I trust you.
I think you should show them a little more about the algorithms. That'll be fun.
Sure. Yeah. When we're offline, I won't do a video recording of it, but I'll pull up examples of architecture that utilizes algorithmic logic.
There's this thing on Netflix about algorithms, and it's real informative.
Really?
It's a math professor.
It's on Netflix?
From Oxford.
Maybe we can check it out.
It's a good one though. It's a good one. What? And he visualizes algorithms and